There was once a man called Fred Smith, who fortunately had a rather more interesting job than name. As the long-suffering park keeper in Cherry Tree Lane, Fred has witnessed more general tomfoolery and run-of-the-mill shenanigans than most people would see in several very long lifetimes. Yet no matter how bewitched or bamboozled he became, he always found himself back in the comforting surroundings of his beloved park. Now he'd been lassoed by he knew not what tricks or trumpery, and somehow shanghaied into the wilds of the southern hemisphere. If he didn't know any better, and he didn't, he might have good reason for suspecting his nemesis, Mary Poppins, to be behind the whole riotous episode. "Observe the rules, remember the bylaws," he barked, more to comfort himself than to reprove those he found gathered before him as if for a rather special event. He was particularly conscious of the presence of the Lord Mayor, who most everybody rather disarmingly called George, and not your worship or your lordship or even plain old Mr. Mayor. But then everybody here and everything seemed to be the other way about, or upside down, or inside out, or whatever you were when you were on the bottom of the world. At home in Cherry Tree Lane, he had often thought that to get down under, you simply had to dig a deep enough hole. It was the coming back that got him confused, because he reasoned you couldn't just go back down the hole, because that would take you further down and not up, and it was all a bit much for poor old Fred to get his head around. He was reminded of the Midsummer's Eve festivities in the old country, that most magical night of the year when nothing stands to reason. Although instead of Orion starring in the night sky as he did at home, here it was Crucis, or the Southern Cross, a constellation that reminded Fred of nothing so much as a kite with a beauty spot, just like the one that Mr. Banks once flew all around Cherry Tree Lane. Instead of a nightingale singing in Berkeley Square, here there were magpies carolling in the mango trees, or kookaburras laughing it up at the expense of all and sundry. Yes, this latest chicanery certainly bore all the distinctive hallmarks of a Mary Poppins adventure, and she was certain to pop up at any moment, parroting on about some old wives' tale, even though as far as he knew she was no wife at all, let alone old. But Fred had learnt to watch his P's and Q's when pooh-poohing old wives' tales, because if he did, as sure as eggs are eggs, they would prove to be true. He supposed this whole sorry business had something to do with him being drafted into looking after a new park, as if he hadn't enough to do, caring for the very large park in Cherry Tree Lane. It seems the powers that be just kept on extending the bounds of operation, like they were creating some sort of magical map that grew before your every footstep. First, it was the Story Bank here, a place of whimsy, if ever there were one. And now, an extra pocket of park at the rear would need to be managed, protected from litterers and laziness and those who walk all over the grass. Still, he thinks they haven't done such a bad job with it, even if it is called Mary's Garden. The lawn, he notes, is the finest Sir Walter, most chivalrous, and nearly as fine as the chamomile he has chosen for the herb garden at home. And those benches, if he isn't mistaken, though not like the marble ones he favoured, were new-minted vintage, bearing the unmistakable fingerprints of Mr. Peter Olds. The fountain, he could see, is actual vintage. But what are those creatures on it? Perhaps the platypus, or a gigantic goldfish, or idealized dolphins. And as his friends, the first people, had told him, where there are dolphins, there are whales. And, oh, but wasn't it easy to see where magical thinking could lead you? To a fountain as a planter for herbs, for sweet basil and parsley, for coriander, marigold and cornflowers, to the intoxicating scent of lavender in your drawers, mingled with the roses, and a whole corner for rosemary, for remembrance. And eureka! Fred Smith suddenly recalled that his mother had retired here, down under, where she said she would spend her dotage feeding the birds in the portico of the Story Bank. Their creator, P.L. Travers, had been born here, she said, and that she personally believed it was here Mary Poppins came when she wasn't in Cherry Tree Lane. Here she could be just another Mary in a borough full of them. How could he have so completely forgotten? Finally, he made sense of something Mary Poppins once said that had bemused him ever since. All that is lost is somewhere. He could see now that it wasn't an old wives' tale at all, that it was the truth, not plain and simple, but rather elegant and wise. And it was then, and only then, that Fred Smith, rather uncommonly, felt like he had also come home to a gentler time, where he might indulge himself with a bit of magical thinking, and where he, like everyone else who had gathered for the purpose, could celebrate the anniversary of the birth of the storyteller who had brought them all together. And even though there were fairy cakes and macaroons and cucumber sandwiches to look forward to, he was rather more anticipating the reunion with his mother, who, though she might have nothing to say but feed the birds, twopence a bag, would surely lavish upon him a mother's love and some hot buttered toast for his tea.